On late Saturday, April 13th, the Islamic Republic of Iran began Operation True Promise by launching explosive drones and firing missiles at Israeli-occupied territory. The Iranian salvo of more than 300 drones and missiles came almost 2 weeks after Israel targeted Iran's consulate in Damascus that resulted in the assassination of a number of high-ranking Iranians, including General Mohammad Reza Zahedi, one of Iran's most senior commanders in its Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, and Mohammad Hadi Haji Rahimi, his deputy. Operation True Promise was Tehran's first direct attack on the Israeli regime after a long period of strategic patience, a new chapter in the history of the region. A few hours before Iran launched Operation True Promise, we asked political analyst Mr. Saadullah Zarei about the possibility of a direct action by Iran against the Israeli regime.
آقای بایدن رئیس جمهور آمریکا و هم بلینکن وزیر خارجه آمریکا
U.S. President Joe Biden, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and other top officials in the United States, as well as in Israel, have said that Iran would respond to the attack on its consulates in Damascus. Some have predicted that the response would be severe. When they say that the Islamic Republic would respond, it means that they are confessing to Tehran's ability to retaliate. So, Iran, in the eyes of its enemies, is both willing to and capable of taking action in retaliation against what the Israeli regime did to its diplomatic mission in Syria.
Iran's decision to retaliate against Israel from its own soil has raised many eyebrows, even as the attacks appear to be carefully calibrated to avoid a full-scale war.
ما در پی وارد کردن ضربه‌ای به اسرائیل هستیم.
We are seeking to deal a proper blow to Israel so that the regime would forget all about such reckless actions against Iran in the future. At the same time, we are not going to fan the flames of war. We don't want to escalate tensions in the region. So our strikes would be limited and calculated. In other words, we are going to take revenge without trying to drag the whole region into an all-out war. Our main aim is to deter the Israeli regime from threatening our interests in the region.
A direct attack by Iran on Israel was not believed to be on the cards. The Iranians had previously made clear that they were not seeking a war with Israel. In fact, Iran had never responded with such force to previous attacks, including many covert Israeli operations on its soil. This is Mr. Morteza Makki, a political analyst based in Tehran.
پس از گمانه‌زنی‌های زیادی که طی 2 هفته گذشته
After much speculation over the past 2 weeks, the Islamic Republic of Iran eventually took retaliatory action against Israel by sending tens of drones and missiles towards the regime's critical points. Iran's action has obviously changed the game. The Israelis were under the impression that Tehran would take action indirectly through the resistance axis, for example, and would not put aside its strategic patience, but they were wrong, and as a result, the direct attack came as a shock to them.
Iran has plausible arguments for the retaliatory attack, which was a legitimate response to Israel's terrorist attack on the Islamic Republic's diplomatic premises in the Syrian capital. According to a statement issued by the Islamic Republic's mission to the United Nations, Iran's military action was based on Article 51 of the United Nations Charter concerning legitimate defense in response to the Zionist regime's aggression against our diplomatic premises in Damascus. Mr. Ahmad Momeni Arad, professor of international law at Tehran University, has more to say.
اقدامی که در
The military action the Israeli regime took against Iran's consulate on April 1st is according to international laws an action against Iran's sovereignty. It's an illegal action under international laws. In this case, according to Article 51 of the UN Charter, Iran has the right of self-defense because an armed attack has occurred against the country. Prior to Operation True Promise, Iran had frequently asked the Security Council to take necessary measures against Israel's illegal action. But unfortunately, the Council did nothing in this regard. So Iran upheld its right of self-defense by launching an operation that was more defensive in nature than being retaliatory.
Top Iranian commanders warned Israel that the country would face a bigger attack if it retaliates against overnight drone and missile strikes. In the words of the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, Major General Hossein Salami, the Zionist regime must stop its past behavior and learn from this attack. If the Zionist regime shows any response, our reaction will certainly be much harsher based on this new experience we have gained from their capabilities. Adding, from now on, if the Zionist regime attacks our interests, assets, figures, and citizens at any point, it will face counterattack from within the Islamic Republic of Iran. Mr. Mehdi Khorassan enumerated a list of subversive actions taken by Israel against the Islamic Republic over the past years.
Assassinating our nuclear scientists, taking exo-sabotage in our nuclear sites, abortive attempt against Barakat Pharmaceutical Group, supporting secessionists in border areas, orchestrating arson attacks in Mahidash bases in Kermanshah, attacking nuclear facilities in Karaj, Natanz and other places, recruiting spies and financing terrorists. These are some actions the Israeli regime has taken against Iran over the past 4 decades.
Operation True Promise was unprecedented in many aspects. It was the first direct military action taken by Tehran against the Israeli regime. But can it be a game changer? Mr. Khorassan told us that Iran's first direct action against Israel was inevitable.
وقتی گستاخی پا از حد فراتر می رود و رژیم صهیونیستی برای اولین بار
When the regime crossed our red lines and attacked our consulate for the first time, which is tantamount to attacking our soil, we had no option but to take a strong action. We had to shatter the regime's illusions that Iran was afraid of it, and the country's strategic patience was out of fear or weakness. The fact is, whatever the regime had done prior to its attack on Iran's consulate did not require Tehran to take a direct military action against the regime.
The scale of Iran's attack, the diversity of locations it targeted, and weapons it used forced Israel to uncover the majority of anti-missile technologies the US and the regime have across the region. A big achievement at low cost. Tehran did not use any weapons Israel didn't know it had. It just used a lot of them. Iran likely now has almost a full map of what Israel's missile systems looks like, as well as where in Jordan and the Persian Gulf the US has installations. It also knows how long it takes to prepare them or how Israeli society responds. This is a huge strategic cost to Israel. While some Arab states are now being blasted by their people, particularly the Jordanian monarchy, for not doing anything to protect Gazans, but then going all out to protect Israel. Mr. Makki told us why Tehran launched drones and missiles simultaneously.
ببینید این سامان 3 لایه داره.
Israel's system is multi-layered. The first layer is supposed to intercept rockets, the second layer to intercept mid-range missiles, and the third layer to intercept long-range missiles. By sending drones, Iran aimed at disrupting the first layer, and by sending missiles of different ranges, Iran managed to change the second and the third layers of the Iron Dome.
Iran can now reverse engineer all the intelligence it has gathered from this attack for future attacks if the occasion arises. That's why the US and Israel will have to redesign their current model, which has been compromised. Before Iran's operation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was moved to a bunker in Al-Quds. Zionist soldier vacations were canceled ahead of the attack, and all reservists were ordered to report for duty. Israeli forces issued warnings to settlers to avoid large gatherings while remaining close to shelters. Meanwhile, Israeli officials pleaded with their allies to do anything to stop Iran. From now on, the Israeli regime has to do all these things before taking any reckless action against Iranian interests.
عملیاتی که ایران در قبال اسرائیل انجام داد
The action Iran took against Israel showed just part of the country's defense capabilities. Iran has hypersonic missiles that can reach Israel in minutes. If Iran had used them, the blow to the regime would have been much more crushing. Over the past 2 weeks, Israel was a bundle of nerves, and Netanyahu cannot keep going like this. In case of another attack by Israel, Iran would not wait for 2 weeks. Its response would be swift and severe. The fact is, we have entered a new phase of tensions in the region. Israel and its allies need to reconsider their plans. Any misstep can throw the whole region into further chaos, tension, and war. And don't forget, the victims of this situation would not be just regional countries, but also Western countries that have many interests in the region.
There's plenty more to be said, but first a quick media review to give other outlets a chance to get a word in.
Hello everyone, welcome to the news section of this program. Here, we'll go over some important news headlines. Iran rolls dice in conflict with Israel. Financial Times writes, it was just before 2 a.m. when the barrage of Iranian drones and missiles swarmed over the Israeli sky. Israelis who had waited anxiously for several hours after first being swarmed that the arsenal of projectiles was heading their way scurried to safe rooms or bomb shelters. After more than 4 decades of hostility between the arch foes, Israel was for the first time under a direct attack from Iran. It puts the Middle East ever nearer the full-blown regional conflict that Western and Arab leaders have feared since Hamas's October 7 attack. Israel warded off a huge Iranian attack, but that success is not the same as victory. After years in which Israel threatened relentlessly to target Iran's nuclear facilities and indeed engage in a series of operations to set back Iran's nuclear program, it was Iran that launched the first major attack between the two enemies. It bragged that it was able to scare the Israeli public for days ahead of the much-touted assault, and it now claims to have changed the equation, warning that future Israeli strikes on Iranian territory, including its international diplomatic premises, will henceforth again be met by Iranian retaliatory strikes on Israel. True promise. Why and how did Iran launch a historic attack on Israel? Iran has just launched the largest ever drone strike in the world and the biggest missile attack in its history. Al Jazeera writes, the attack was mainly aimed at strengthening Iran's deterrence, which critics said had been compromised after increasingly confrontational policies and military strikes by the United States and its allies across the region, especially following the January 2020 assassination of top General Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. Iranian officials also appear to have exercised a degree of strategic patience after the late December assassination of another top IRGC commander in Syria, Razi Mousavi, in an Israeli air raid amid the fallout of the war on Gaza. In action, lower-grade strikes are being content with military action through the axes of resistance of aligned groups across the region would, in this vein, be viewed as too costly for Iran both locally and abroad. Iran's attack seemed planned to minimize casualties while maximizing spectacle. According to CNN, a decades-long shadow war burst out into the open overnight as Iranian drones and missiles lit up the night sky in Israel and the occupied West Bank. Tehran's operation was highly choreographed, apparently designed to minimize casualties while maximizing spectacle. For some 4 hours, the world held its breath as weapons whizzed through the night sky. There were balls of fire hovering overhead as onlookers across 3 different countries filmed images that seemed to hearken the start of an all-out war. Why Israel's attack on Iranian consulate in Syria was a game-changer. The Guardian writes, the large-scale attack by Iran on Israel may have passed with relatively little damage, but it marks a significant transformation in the conflict between the two enemies. A war that has long been fought through proxies, assassinations, and strikes away from Israeli soil, often in third countries, has spilled into the open. Thanks for watching this section of this program. Now let's go back to the main narrative.
To save its face, the Israeli regime has been trying to play down the significance of Operation True Promise by distorting the realities. But denying the damage doesn't undo the damage, does it? Commenting on Israel's response to the attack, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posted on X, "We intercepted, we repelled, together we shall win." There's no doubt that Iran could carry out an operation in a large scale, but the attack was limited to the military bases of the Zionist regime, from the Golan Heights to the Negev Desert, that were used in the terrorist attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus.
این پایگاه نوآتیم، پایگاه هوایی نوآتیم اسرائیل که تقریباً در نیمه جنوبی سرزمین‌های اشغالی قرار داره.
The Nevatim air base is one of the most strategic bases of Israel and home to F-35 aircraft. By targeting this base, Iran sent a very important message to the Israeli regime that we are not afraid to launch direct attacks from our own soil. On the contrary, we can fearlessly send swarms of drones and missiles toward Israel, challenging its Iron Dome and striking our targets vehemently. We are ready for the ultimate goal of annihilating the child-killing regime.
Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian said on Sunday that Iran gave neighboring countries and Israel's ally, the United States, 72 hours notice it would launch the strikes. It means that the Islamic Republic was not after a surprise attack or dealing a bloody blow to Israel, but giving the regime a serious ultimatum. Thanks to the notice, Israel could prepare itself with the help of the US and some other allies for Iran's attack. And yet, the regime was not fully successful in intercepting the drones and missiles. And it means a surprise full-force attack by Iran would land the regime in serious trouble. According to General Salami, dozens of ballistic and cruise missiles managed to break into deep layers of Israel's seemingly safe air defense system, impact the aerial coalition between the US, France, and Israel, and reach the designated targets. We asked Mr. Zari about the potential consequences of Iran's retaliatory attack. He said that Israel should be more afraid of them, not Iran.
سوال: آیا اسرائیلی هایی که نتونستن علیرغم حدود 88 روز
I've got a simple question to ask. Can an impotent regime like Israel stand against the Islamic Republic of Iran? The answer is no. How can a regime which is unable to defeat a resistance group like Hamas defeat Iran? As you know, Hamas is just a resistance group in Gaza, which has been under siege for years. The group has very limited facilities. It has no armed vehicles, no navy, no air force, no classic army, and yet the Israeli regime has failed to defeat this group over the past 6 or 7 months.
The Iranian missile and drone attacks came as a shock to settlers in the occupied territories, since the Israeli media had tried to pacify them for weeks, claiming that Iran's intention for retaliation was not true. However, at the stroke of midnight, both the Israeli media and settlers were gripped by fear. The operation has opened a new chapter for Iran in the fight against the Israeli regime. It included at least 4 waves of drone attacks. The retaliatory military operation also included the launch of a series of cruise and ballistic missiles, which were reportedly accompanied by simultaneous drone and missile strikes by the axis of resistance groups from Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon. According to official reports, Shahed 136 kamikaze drones that carry a relatively small warhead weighing some 50 kilograms were used in the attack on Israel. Moreover, the Shahed 238, which is powered by a turbojet rather than the propeller on the 136 model, was also used in the attack. The Ahmad long-range ballistic missile and the Pave cruise missile were used to attack Israel. Iran also possesses Fatah, a hypersonic ballistic missile that could theoretically arrive in Israel in as little as 7 minutes, along with a cruise missile variant of the same family. There was no indication the missiles were used in the early Sunday attacks. After all, it was a slap on the wrist, and Iran's response to any further military action by Israel will be much greater. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf said, the Iranian forces' deterrence and regret-inducing response delighted the hearts of every Iranian who cares about our honored country's security and glory. In a phone call with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the attack night, U.S. President Joe Biden made clear the U.S. would not participate in any offensive operations against Iran, an implicit acceptance that a military confrontation with Iran would cost both Israel and the U.S. dearly.
The Americans know that they are very vulnerable in the region, and they don't want to engage with Iran. Needless to say, we are not after war with the Americans either. The other day, a White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby said that Israel's attack on Iran's consulate was legitimate, but in the same breath, he said that the action was reckless and against the United States policies. Why did he add that to his remarks? Because he is afraid of his country being dragged into war with Iran. The Americans didn't have a good time in Iraq or in Afghanistan, and they don't want to repeat the same mistake. And you know, these two countries are not comparable with Iran.
Operation True Promise has mocked Israel's invincibility myth, stripping the regime of its deterrence illusion. The Islamic Republic of Iran, under the leadership of Ayatollah Khamenei, has once again given a new momentum to the Palestinian cause.
With the great strength Iran showed, the country conveyed the message that we are capable of launching massive operations, and any attack on our soil or consulates will be faced with crushing responses. The operation, in fact, sought to restore Iran's deterrence. I have to say that over the past years, Iran has been acting in a rational way and in accordance with international laws. It has never sought to begin war or open up new fronts in the region. Whatever the Islamic Republic has done so far has been defensive and preemptive.
Leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, had in his Eid al-Fitr sermon vowed to punish the Israeli regime for the mistake of targeting the Iranian diplomatic mission in Damascus. He made a similar warning a day after the attack was carried out earlier this month, saying the regime would be punished. The Islamic Revolution Guard Corps dubbed the operation True Promise to show Iran leader's seriousness on his vows of punishment for attacks by Israel and others.
By targeting Iran's consulate in Damascus, Israel tried to challenge Iran's deterrence. Given what Ayatollah Khamenei said at Eid al-Fitr sermons, it became clear that Iran would not let Israel go unpunished this time. Now, the region should brace itself for new military and political developments. What would be these developments? It all depends on how the Israeli regime would react to Iran's retaliatory attack and the stance the Americans are going to adopt.
Shortly after the retaliation, Iranians took to the streets at Palestine Square and in front of the University of Tehran in the capital, waving national flags and chanting slogans in support of the retaliatory attack. Similar demonstrations were held in other parts of the country. Rallies were also held on the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in the wholly occupied city of Al-Quds, where Palestinians came out to celebrate after hearing news of the Iranian retaliation. People also took to the streets throughout various cities across the world, celebrating Iran's decisive retaliation against the Israeli regime.
Operation True Promise was recorded as the biggest missile operation as well as the biggest drone operation in the world. The operation cheered up the people of Palestine, the people of the region, and the people of the world, all the freedom-seeking people around the globe who take pity on the children and women of Gaza. The operation was designed in a way so as to avoid non-military targets and therefore collateral damage. It was a very precise and calculated operation.
On the eve of Iran's retaliatory attack, Israel suspended the ground invasion of the city of Rafah in southern Gaza because it did not know how, where, and when Iran would give its retaliatory response. The night Iran carried out Operation True Promise, no one lost his or her life to Israel's indiscriminate airstrikes as the regime was busy defending itself against Iran's retaliation. Iran, under the severest sanctions, did what the Arab coalition had failed to do over the past 7 decades, to humiliate the Israeli regime and scare the life out of it. The rules of engagement have changed. Operation True Promise marks the beginning of a new era when the regime can no longer get away with murder. From now on, the regime's first mistake could be its last one, and there's absolutely harm in trying it. We asked Dr. Momin Irad if the Israeli regime has the right to launch a retaliatory attack against Iran in response to its retaliatory attack.
If we consider the case from the point of view of international laws, no, the regime has no right to attack Iran again. But the fact is, the regime has never abided by international laws and norms since its formation. It has crossed all the red lines and it has committed crimes unprecedented in history. The regime's history is brimmed with all kinds of violations of international laws, of human rights, you name it. It has a track record of illegal occupation of Palestine, invasion, killing, genocide, assassination, displacement of people, destruction of homes, and so on and so forth.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching from the whole team. Please do join us again to see what else is on. You can also follow us on Telegram and X. Till next time, take care.